Good morning and welcome to Spiritual Center for Conscious Living. I'm Spencer and I have Renee with me as well. Um, if you are not familiar with us, we are a 501c3 nonprofit that is. Oh, Renee, I'm getting a little bit of feedback on your end. Hold on, let me see. I think it's okay.
All right.
Okay. Yeah. We're a 501c3 nonprofit dedicated to bringing you spiritual wisdom and tips for living your best conscious life. So thank you so much for joining us. Um, we appreciate your presence being here over everything and your participation. As the title says, this is conscious communication. So we love having you here and hearing from you. And I'd love to encourage you to leave us comments as you feel comfortable, or sharing the video with people you think might find this wisdom helpful. If you feel moved to share with us in other ways, we do accept donations as a 501c3 nonprofit, and you can find links to do that in the description of the video on the respective platform you're watching. So, thank you so much for being here. We are going to get started with Principle 5 of our series, emotional triggers and projection of pain onto others. So, with that being said, I'll hand it over to Renee.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Hello, everyone. Thank you, Spencer. And I just want to say, those of you that are with us live, whether you're here now or joining in a moment, we are just glad to have you. Those of you who are on the replay, we love having you as well. And don't feel shy. Even if you're watching on the replay, please comment and we will respond. I have a little kitty cat that's wanting in my lap. So if I look down, that's what's going on. I'm just taking care of my little sweetie pie. So, as Spencer said, this is Principle 5 in a series that we've been doing that's called Cultivating Conscious Communication, or the Essential Elements for Conscious Communication. And I want to always start. I want to go back to our very first principle, which is cultivating sacred dynamics, is understanding what that is and making the commitment from your heart to commit to engaging in sacred dynamics within relationships. Relationships are energy dynamics. And here we hold that they are sacred. They are certainly meant to be sacred. They're not always handled in a sacred way. They're not always used with the intention of sacredness. And so we've been discussing what gets in the way of relationships being sacred and how to make that transformation from your heart and evolve your consciousness to an awareness that you personally commit to for relationships to be sacred. Now, why would that be so important on the planet? Well, the lack of sacredness in relationships is when human beings use one another for selfish purposes, not use one another for joy. And, it's when human beings do not understand their true nature and that they have a source of pure energy that is God force, life force. I think of it as just beloved source energy or the divine, whatever phrase you like to use, the universe, spirit. It is the force that is the consciousness of life, the energy that is always prevalent and available. We teach here how to get centered with divine presence and power, aligning with that in all you do before you act and speak, so that you are connecting with one another, so that we are all connecting with one another at a level of consciousness that is sacred, that is each of us bringing that divine presence and power with a clear intention. And then there's no reason to, at that point, you're not monitoring, is what I'm doing loving or unkind or helpful. You know that you're being the highest and best in the moment, even without having to understand all the details. So we're going to talk about a different aspect of it. Last week, we did talk about the idea of pushing and pulling energy, which is where one person is feeling vulnerable and they seek validation or approval from another one, and they have a need. They need something in their environment to change. They need something different physically in the material world, and they don't know how to create it for themselves or how to seek it in an authentic and sacred way, openly asking and collaborating with others. They don't know how to go to source to get their energy before beginning a project, for example, or before making a request for someone to support them with something. And so instead they manipulate or dominate. And we see that going on all the time. In fact, I would say that's why most people disengage from a lot of activities. Politics is an example. You even hear thing about church politics in any organization, not just the political arena, but in any organization, what we call politics, which is the pushing and pulling of energy, the manipulation or attempt to dominate, to control. It's a fear-based vulnerability coming in from a human standpoint rather than a person understanding they having awakened to the truth of their being, that we each are spiritual beings. Do we know it and awaken to it, and then do we live in accordance with that, in accord with it, you might say, in harmony with that truth? In other words, do we bring that awareness into our everyday interactions, everything that matters to us? Do we do that? So ask yourself, do you believe you do that? Have you made that an intention, a clear, conscious intention? And perhaps you've made that as an intention, but there are things that happen that trigger you. Something happens in a particular setting and you're triggered, and you don't stay true to that intention. You react then in what is sadly in most cultures considered appropriate, either openly demanding what you want, or kind of covertly manipulating to get what you want, as opposed to bringing energy from source, holding your energy, and knowing that then in that connection with the divine, the power and presence of the divine, you will then have wisdom and beyond your human capacity, that's how innovative ideas come to people it's never been something that's never been experienced before. That's where it comes from. It's beyond human brain intelligence. It is this vast intelligence that is life, that is the power that creates worlds, coming to us and through us when we know to open to it, and when we trust to listen and follow that guidance. So today we're going to talk about another aspect of that. And this is we're going to divide this into two parts. And I want to say that part of why we're doing this, particularly this weekend, is that we're going to be off next Sunday, and then we'll come back on December 4th, and we'll complete this topic. This is about understanding how to manage emotional triggers. And so we know that there's a lot of holidays coming up. They'll be starting in not just in the US, but in other countries. This is a time of year with a lot of sacred connections for various religious and family gatherings, more rituals of coming together and celebrating, or remembering traditions in the family, or honoring traditions in whatever belief you have, whatever spiritual path you're on. And so because of that, people tend to come together more this time of year than most times of year. And when I say people, I mean it can be families, it can be social, it can even be businesses, the end of the year, calendar year for businesses, celebrating together. And it can be a wonderful time when we know how to stay in our own energy, our own consciousness, cultivate it, know it, live it, be it in these experiences we share with one another, so that we can then come to the celebration or the connection, whatever form it's taking, it might be a dinner, it might be a party, it might be a spiritual, a sacred ritual that we share together. And we can come to that bringing our presence aligned with divine energy rather than coming into the gathering expecting to pull on other people's energy, or being easily triggered when someone doesn't behave in a way we would like them to make us feel better, to make us more comfortable. So what I'm suggesting to you is that as you go into this season, which is starting is this week for many people, as you go into this season of many forms of celebration and gatherings, set an intention that you will bring your awareness and your presence for the purpose of exchanging joy, rather than you will be there demanding anything of anyone else. Now, as I say that, I don't mean that you tolerate anything abusive. Please don't do that. That is not what we're talking about here. What I'm really wanting you to understand is that be very clear. If, let's say, Thanksgiving is a holiday that's about to come up here in the United States. So whatever next gathering you have with family or business or social or spiritual groups, I ask you right now to set an intention. You will go to that gathering aligned with divine presence and power and open to new awareness, and just observe others rather than needing them to do or say any certain thing for you to feel joy, for you to feel at ease, for you to feel connected. I'm suggesting that you commit to learn how to do that for yourself with your true source of love and trust and supply in every form, and then bring that to the connection. Now, I want to talk today about what happens when you're doing your best to do that, and then something happens that triggers an old emotional pain that you have not yet healed. It might be something you're aware of. It might be something that surprises you. Next week, next live stream, which is actually 2 weeks, when we come back together, we will then expand on that and help you process that. So I want you to be aware that as you do this, you may have an amazing opportunity, a gift of awareness presented to you through the energy force of life, through the divine, that is coming to you to make you aware that you have an emotional wound that is ready to be released. You might think of it as a healing. I think of it as a release. It's just time to release it. They're holding on to it. And what is very common in dynamics that are not sacred is one person is carrying an emotional wound, an unresolved, unhealed pain, emotional pain from some experience. It could be something from childhood. It could be something in adult life. It could be something the person doesn't even know where it comes from. And it creates this sort of this prickliness where certain words, certain attitudes, certain body language, certain dynamics, certain behaviors set off that wound. It's as if a person deliberately just touches the most painful emotional wound, as if you had a horrible bruise on your or some sort of abscess wound that gets pushed, and it's so excruciatingly painful. That's called an emotional trigger. And when that happens, I ask you to take a breath right now. Maybe think about a time that's happened to you recently, or something that's a pattern that's been a recurring situation in your life, an emotional wound that sets off excruciating emotional pain for you. And when someone else does or says something that, quote, triggers that wound, that's yet to be healed and released, what do you do? Do you retreat? Do you react in an explosive way? You're so hurt and you lash out with the hurt. If so, we're going to learn a better way. So please, we're not here to judge you. Please don't judge yourself. But do please commit to learn a higher consciousness way, because that's the pattern that keeps such turmoil and chaos in relationships and in your own life. Your own personal well-being then is never pure, is never something you can relax and trust, because in any moment that horrible emotional pain can be set off because you don't know a better way. And I want to be sure you understand this. I know sometimes people do that on purpose, but mostly it doesn't happen intentionally. Mostly somebody is not meaning to do that. It's you who has the trigger, and it is your responsibility, and only you. In fact, it's not just your responsibility. It's you are the only one who can heal that. You are the only one who can heal your wounds, your emotional wounds. And I have great compassion for those wounds. So please do not think that by saying this, I'm just saying, get over it. You do have to make a commitment that you're ready to move beyond it. And you have to make that with absolute conviction. You are ready to move beyond it. And when you make that commitment to yourself as a point of sacred self-love and sacred self-care, I promise you, the power that creates worlds will move mountains to support you in having that released, so that you are free to never again experience that pain, and to glean whatever wisdom you need to be able to fully release it and move beyond it. I don't like to think of it as a lesson you need to learn. To me, that still brings a sense of punishment or penitence. It's not a lesson you need to learn. It's an experience that you went through. It could have been a very traumatic experience. So be kind to yourself about that. You did experience something very painful. That is true. You don't need to live in that pain forevermore. You can instead glean the wisdom, that gift of awareness from the experience. You can glean it in a moment when it happens. You can learn to do it in every moment. You can learn to do it very quickly. You can learn to do this. And we're going to have a second part where we really go deeper into how to process for the purpose of release, not process for the purpose of forever analyzing and assessing and never really being free of that entangled energy with either the person or group of people that maybe perpetrated it knowingly or unknowingly. We want you to have self-mastery of your emotions, which then gives you self-mastery of your energy, which then allows you to have self-mastery to evolve your consciousness beyond whatever beliefs were created around this emotional pain. We end up creating beliefs to protect ourselves. And those beliefs are not always wise. They may be necessary in the moment, especially as something that happened to you as a child when you really were vulnerable, truly vulnerable. But as an adult, we can move out of that vulnerability. Again, I'm not talking about tolerating abuse. So if you're in any situation that's abusive, I am not saying learn to be in that situation and tolerate this constant behavior. I'm not talking about a toxic dynamic where you are allowing someone, in the moment it may be out of your control, but But if you then become aware of it and don't take action to move out of it, then you are participating in allowing the abuse. So even if it's a mild, just a disrespect or an unkindness, don't participate in that. Don't believe you have to endure it. You can also reach a level of consciousness where you observe it and you just step away from it. Energetically, you don't engage. You don't allow your energy to be pulled into that dynamic, because you are master of your energy, and you are master of your consciousness, and you are master then of your emotions and your thoughts. You choose then how to deal with difficult, entangled relationships. Now, I'm not saying that every family dynamic will be like that, but there does seem like, in most families, there seems to be occasionally these encounters that are challenging. And hopefully I would love it if you had a family that never happened. For most people, the holidays are very difficult because of this. And it's a time where people feel either obligated to come together, or they just very much want to come together to experience love and joy and harmony and celebration, whether it's a spiritual celebration, a family celebration, or just a social celebration. And that's a beautiful choice. I invite you to come in it with grounded awareness and alignment to the divine as your power and presence in every moment, not just in holiday gatherings, but in every way you live. So let's talk about today's points. Just talk about them briefly, and then I'm going to walk you through a process as a way to bring the teaching personally into your consciousness and allow you the opportunity to practice it. We're going to practice it together. So the teaching points today, and this is in the program if you'd like to follow along on our website. I know Spencer puts that in the description for us, scfcl.org. It's on the homepage. There's a red PDF icon. And we're on principle number 5 in the series. You will see that. Emotional triggers and projection of pain onto others. The teaching point, the concept is this: if you don't process your pain, emotional pain, you will inevitably project it onto others. And we're going to expand on how to process it next week. I am going to help you with that in the energy activation that we do as we go into our meditation. But just please embrace that. It's important for your own well-being that you learn to have awareness when an emotional trigger happens, when you have an emotional pain that becomes triggered. Be aware of it, embrace that as an amazing gift, an opportunity to heal, release that emotional wound to where you are free from it for the rest of your life, to where you will never again be triggered by it. No one could ever then put you in that situation if they're doing it intentionally. And people who are doing it unknowingly, it's actually that you're so sensitive. It's so painful that it gets easily triggered. And that is yours to manage. I say that, dear one, with love for you and caring for your well-being and your happiness. And if you don't process emotional pain and you hold it in, it becomes terrible disease in your body. It's also just a very painful way to live emotionally and mentally. And the 2 questions we're going to explore is when it happens, when you're engaging with someone and everyone's at the moment, you feel that your intentions are all honorable, you're there to have a good time. When you feel triggered, first of all, first question, do you realize that it's you who is triggered? And then process the unresolved emotional pain that was revealed. If you don't know how to do that, we're going to teach you that. We're going to touch on it today, but we'll go into it more deeply on December 4th. The second question is, when you feel triggered, do you make that self-inquiry, or do you make inquiry of the other person? Do you make inquiry to see if that person might not have done it intentionally. And then, do you honor yourself, your own wisdom, when you know that they do? Because sometimes people do that. There are situations, and unfortunately, family gatherings are one of them. Business gatherings, that's one of them. Sometimes just social interactions where there's a person there who practices a bully dynamic, and they like to be the bully, and they'd intentionally say things that are unkind or cruel to trigger reactions at people, to stir up drama. And then there are situations where a person will knowingly manipulate and kind of pull on everybody's energy. And when you know that's happening, please honor that. You can't stop the other person. We went into this last week from doing it, but you can you can rise to a consciousness where it is not going to hook you, and you will not play that game with them. And you will do that in a way that's honorable and strong. It's strong and it's honorable and sacred as well. All right. So I'm going to ask a question of you before we begin the process, because what I want to help you do today is we're going to go through a process where I'm going to walk you through what happens when you're triggered and walk you through a more evolved way of managing that moment that can be absolutely overwhelming because the pain is so excruciating. So I'm going to walk you through that and help you to learn how to release it. We'll go more deeply into it next week. So I ask you, Spencer's got some music for us. If you would go ahead and put that on for us, please. I ask you to take some breaths and just get really centered in your heart, not, in your heart space. Ask your mind to be still for a moment. Allow that beautiful brain to just rest. We're not needing your brain to defend you. You will be completely safe to be vulnerable in this moment. Just take a breath and exhale. And take another breath, please. Exhale with sound. Let that go all through your body. And one more deep breath, please. Very gently, thoroughly let that out. And now, beautiful being, I ask you this question. You know the things that trigger emotional pain for you. You don't have to tell anyone else. This is between you and the divine. There is a force in life, the force that created you. That same force is here to love you, support you, guide you to a life that is safe and secure and calm and serene and enjoyable, to experience joy in whatever ways are the most meaningful for you. And so, dear one, you know something that is easily triggered in you, a pain from an emotional wound. It may be, you may not know where it started. It doesn't matter. In this moment, that's not what we're here to talk about. In this moment, I just want you to be aware of it. Just be aware. Yes, there's something that triggers me. There is an emotional wound that I am ready to release that is triggered too often, and I don't want to live that way anymore. I don't want to be at the mercy of somebody who practices knowingly or unknowingly a dynamic that triggers that in me, that vulnerability. It might be something that brings up shame. It might be something that brings up guilt. It might be something that brings up some sense of not being good enough, not being enough in some way. I don't believe that to be true. That's not the truth of your being. But I really do understand in the vulnerable human states of connecting and going through life and accomplishing and collaborating with others, that can be triggered. It happens a lot. Many forms of I'm not enough. And when that is triggered, it can be excruciating. Sometimes it's mild. And sometimes we've learned to just push it down to where it's still excruciating. We just don't let ourselves feel it. Maybe, and when it's felt and it is excruciating, that's when the temptation is there to lash out. So I invite you to be aware of the last time you did that, whether it was done in an explosive manner, really angry, or in a quiet manner, just a word or two. Maybe nothing was said. Maybe it was a withholding of affection or a withdrawal from something that you had agreed to participate in. And that might have been the wisest choice for you. I'm not saying it was wrong. I'm saying that it's possibly not how you actually want to go through your life. There's a better way. It's not wrong to withdraw, but then you want to heal it so that you don't continue to go through that cycle of pain, being triggered, and not knowing how to be free from that cycle, which then creates this guardedness, this walking on eggshells around people to not set off the dynamic that is so painful. It's also, it keeps you from being able to fully open your heart to those who would never intentionally hurt you. And if they unintentionally trigger that pain, I promise you that's a gift of awareness from the divine for you to be free from it now in a safe space with someone who is safe to process something so emotionally vulnerable. And in this moment, I ask you to be aware of that. And I ask you to choose to honor yourself that way. Choose to honor yourself with sacred self-love, that you will admit to yourself there is an emotional wound. There may be more than one. Just choose one right now. There's an emotional wound that is triggered. You may be so aware of it that you're dreading holiday gatherings. There's things you're looking forward to, and then there's certain ones, certain personalities that dynamic seems to always trigger that pain. You want to go into this gathering, whether it's business or social or family, and you want or personal connections, and you want to feel the joy of that connection. And you may do so, and then you open up, and then the vulnerability is there, and something happens, and you feel triggered, and you either shut down, withdraw your love, withdraw your connection, or you feel the need to lash out. It's just so painful. You just can't take it, and you lash out. Take a breath, please. If you have done that recently, I ask you to forgive yourself in this moment. Forgive yourself for lashing out. Not because you want to continue doing it, not at all. But forgive yourself because that was the best you knew in the moment. We're going to learn better in the coming weeks. We'll continue this in December, and we'll practice it. 3 different Sundays, we'll practice it together. Forgive yourself and commit to try again from a higher consciousness. Take a deep breath. Release that. Release that burden. You can't undo it, but you can create a new experience going forward. You can create better skills, bringing your spiritual wisdom and spiritual practices into these gatherings, these interactions, the dynamics that are relationship energy dynamics that have been overwhelming in the past can become very clear and very manageable. Sacred self-mastery. Self-mastery, not mastery over others. Sacred self-mastery. And I invite you now to just know that and trust that and make this choice. Should you be triggered as we go through it in the next few weeks while we're learning together, just commit. When you feel triggered, you will make the choice to observe and not engage in the energy dynamic. Observe, practice awareness, open to divine guidance, and ask for awareness to understand from a higher wisdom. And do not engage until you learn the skill to do so with sacredness. Observe, open to the divine, ask for awareness, and breathe. Perhaps walk away. Perhaps say to the person, I'll have to think, if they ask a question that triggers, I'll have to get back with you on that. I'll need time to think about that. I don't choose to answer that at this time. Very simple. I don't choose to answer that at this time. I'll have to get back with you. I'll need a moment to think about that. You'll find the words, something along that line, to wait and not engage while you're triggered. Honor yourself that way. This is about you. This is about you honoring yourself so that you can enjoy sacred energy dynamics and all the richness that brings in life, rather than in a vulnerable moment feeling that your emotional wound is bared, your soul is bared, unprotected, and you don't feel that you have to continue. You don't have to continue and push forward. In that moment, honor yourself, open to the divine, for awareness, for guidance, for love, for support. Divine presence and power is with you always. Receive it, allow it, be present with it. And now, take some breaths as we come back together to have a conversation about this in any way that feels appropriate for you. Just keep taking a few breaths. Release deeply. Another breath, please. Release deeply. Another breath, please. Release, release, release. Release to the divine. Release to the divine. Okay. And now we're going to have a conversation about this this thing that happens that we call being triggered. This thing that happens where in our lifetime something happened that left us very, very traumatized and wounded emotionally. It could be on a scale of 1 to 10. It could be a 1. It could be a 10 plus, it could be really, really painful. We may not even know where it came from. So if you don't know where it came from, don't worry about that. That's your brain trying to resolve this. We want to come into the heart space, that where the mind and the brain, the mind and the heart come together and open to the divine for infinite intelligence and infinite wisdom and infinite love to hold you safe as you learn how to process and release this wound. so that you can then engage with awareness instead of engaging from this old. It's like you triggered back to the child that was scared and vulnerable, or the young adult, or a time even as a mature adult where you truly were vulnerable. It happens. You could have truly been a victim of something very traumatic, and it takes you back to that. And we want to learn how to stay present and engage when capable, not when you're incapable. When you're not capable, trust that and honor yourself and withdraw, and then go to the divine to feel the safety and get the awareness. Maybe reach out for help from a spiritual advisor, or maybe a trauma specialist. There's a lot of wounds that they become embedded in your neurological pathway, and we have to get help with that. So as we go into our conversation, here's what we're going to talk about. I'm going to review this so that we can kind of just help everyone get grounded, okay? And so what we're talking about today is principle number 5, emotional triggers and projection of pain onto others. And the concept, the teaching point is, if you don't learn to spiritually process and release emotional pain, you will inevitably project it when you don't even mean to. It will come out. I say it comes out sideways because you didn't even know it was happening. It just comes out. You will end up projecting onto others. So here are the 2 questions. And I ask you to consider a time when this happened, and then come into the conversation and, just, do you need help with any of these, either the concept of processing and projecting, or one of these questions? When this has happened to you and you have become triggered, do you, in the moment it happens, do you realize it's you who is triggered, not the other person? The other person may not have intentionally done it. And then do you know, because it's your trigger, do you process the unresolved emotional pain that was revealed? And do you embrace that revelation as an amazing divine gift of awareness for you, to give you freedom from this horrible, painful cycle? And the other question is, when you feel triggered, do you inquire to see if the other person did that intentionally? Because they may not have. Or that they did, and not knowing as in you're inflamed and your egos, got you trapped in it. But you have this energy, you sense it. Your divine guidance is telling you this person is deliberately wanting to trigger you. Do you honor that when you know that, instead of pushing through, trying to make yourself deal with it over and over and over again in a relationship, especially that comes up around holidays a lot with families, holiday gatherings? Okay, so any of those points that you would like either additional understanding about, or some guidance in a particular situation for you to better understand and implement it for yourself, so that it can become more of a natural way of being, instead of a traumatic thing that you have to brace yourself to get through. Sometimes we'd have that with family dynamics, unfortunately. So, all right, Spencer, do you have a question, or do we have anyone asking a question?
I don't see anybody asking questions in the comments. I do want to invite everybody to, if you feel comfortable, share your questions or comments in the respective comment sections as I'm monitoring them. And we do ask that you do it with the utmost respect to all parties involved, and keep specifics at a minimum. If you'd like to go deeper, we do offer private consultations on our website. So just wanted to say that before we dive in here.
Thank you, Spencer.
You're welcome. Yeah, so I guess what has been coming up. Oh, hold on a second. I'm hearing my voice. I don't know if you can perhaps turn your volume down a little bit, Renee.
Me?
Like,
Okay.
yeah, on your computer. I think I'm coming through, and I'm hearing myself.
How's that?
Let's
Is
see.
that better?
Um, I think so. Yeah, I don't hear myself anymore. Perfect. Thank you. Can you hear me?
Okay.
Can you hear me okay?
I can hear you just
Okay.
fine. Yes. Thank you.
Perfect. Um, that's also a perfect demonstration for anybody who wants to make a comment. If they can't hear us or need us to adjust some settings, we are
Yes,
open to
please
that.
do.
So,
Please do.
I guess what's been coming up for me lately has been more like self-inflicted traumas, if that makes sense. That like I get triggered by, but I don't know that I necessarily project on other people. And most of it, as like an example, would be like if I said something that I felt might have offended somebody, or like made a joke that I thought was funny but other people found hurtful.
Ah,
Because
yes.
and I it'll be random moments where I'll just be driving and be like, hey, remember when you said that? And then all of a sudden I'm like, it just hurts, and I'm like, um
Yeah.
trying to process that. And that's what's been coming up for me lately. And I think that kind of lends itself to being with family and stuff like that, around the holidays, and trying to um navigate without making those faux pas, and then also learning to forgive ourselves when we do it. But sometimes it's hard because it's like you don't always have that forgiveness from the other people, because you might not even know if you offended them.
That's a great, I'm glad you brought up the other perspective there. Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. So, I'm going to ask you a few questions. Before I do, I want to go ahead and expand on what you said just for a moment.
Yep.
Um, it's an interesting thing. So it isn't possible for us to know everyone else's triggers. And it is very important for us to take responsibility for our trigger. What triggers us is our trigger. It's not somebody, there's we hear people say this. Somebody said blah blah and they triggered me. I was, it can be somebody you enjoy, somebody, a friend. I was doing this and then dad gum them, they said blah 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 and triggered me. That's not true. What's true is they said something and you carry a wound that you have not healed. And you are the only one who can heal that and release that guardedness, that woundedness. And once you release it, you won't be triggered anymore. You had the experience, it caused pain, but you don't have to carry the pain around like this little explosive that can be set off at any moment, or this horrible heartache that can be stomped on at any moment. So we have things in the human realm, not all dynamics are sacred. They're not, that people are not sacred with one another most of the time, unfortunately. We've talked about this throughout the series. Human consciousness is evolving where we're getting better at that. And there are many more people now practicing things like the conscious living is what we call the practice. Many more people are doing that. However, just because somebody is using spiritual or religious terms or emotionally loving terms doesn't mean that's the energy they're bringing. And that's where it gets tricky. So that's why I like to teach at the level of consciousness and energy. Don't just go by somebody's words. Trust the energy you're sensing. All right. I'm glad you brought that up. We cannot be responsible for another person's emotional pain. Now, what if you know somebody? Let's go ahead and expand a little bit on it, and then we're going to circle back to, I'm going to ask you to help clarify, what you brought up as your question, because it's a great question. So let's say you're getting ready to meet with family, right? Or you're getting ready, it could be a group of friends, it could be a family gathering, it could be a business, connection, holiday gathering. You're getting ready to meet with a group of people, and there are certain people in that get triggered by certain things, especially if it's family. It's like every year we sit down for the holiday dinner or whatever it is, and something is said or done by one particular person that triggers the same old dynamic in another. There's this energy exchange. It's not sacred. It is sometimes deliberate, sometimes unintentional. It's like, and you think, why do they just stop saying that? Right. And sometimes, they're just being stubborn. And sometimes that's the only way they know to get attention instead of actual love. They want this angry attention. So what you want to, what we have to be aware of is if we try to manage another person's trigger, we end up walking on eggshells forever around everyone. And that's very toxic for yourself, for your health. But the other part of that is you will never engage in a sacred dynamic when you're walking on eggshells, because we have to be our whole self, our pure self. And when I say that, I don't mean, well, I'm just going to be this obnoxious whatever because that's who I am. No, it's who you're choosing to be. It's not who you are, as if you don't have a choice. We have a choice. We can allow our humor, and our humor may not, everyone's humor is different. I know sometimes I've had the same thing that you just described, where I think that was I made a joke and it was maybe kind of goofy or something, right? And I'm like, well, there's a part of me that's kind of silly, that is kind of silly and goofy. And then there's a part of me that's very, very spiritual and very deep and reflective. But I don't want to never be silly, and I don't want to feel that I have to be lighthearted when a topic for me is very sacred, and I want to be deep and have that inner wisdom when I converse about it. So first of all, I want to say this in answer to your question, Spencer. You have the right to be you. And as we're teaching it here, the sacred you, the whole of you, the sacred divine self leading the unique human self. The human self is every one of us. It's a unique humor and a unique perspective and a unique wisdom and a unique innovative ideas and creativity, unique expression. We all have that. Think of it like wearing clothing. We don't have to all wear the same clothing. We get to express ourselves. That's what clothing is, one way of how we express ourselves, right? We get to choose different hairstyles and different clothing, and that's just an external. But we have all this richness that is the human, and we also have the richness that is the divine self, the human self and the divine self. And so you don't want to put yourself in a cage where you have to be so careful that you never set off another person's trigger. Because if you didn't do it intentionally, it's not your fault. It doesn't mean you don't care. I realize that. I'm not suggesting that you don't care. I'm suggesting that you don't take the responsibility, because you aren't responsible and you don't have authority over that. You don't have control over what triggers another person. If you know something triggers someone, obviously you don't, unless you need to talk about it. You don't want, and if you need to talk about it, then you will do so. You will want to prepare yourself and make sure you're very grounded and centered and coming in as your divine self. Because sometimes we do have to talk about things that trigger people. People are triggered by money. People are triggered by sex. People are triggered by religion and politics. And goodness, what kind of food to eat for the celebration, and what kind of spiritual practice to have during celebrations. And there's so many things that are triggers for people. We might never know. I would say it's not possible to fully know what has happened in anybody's life that has set up an emotional pain that could be triggered by something you or I or anyone listening, something we might do or say. We can't know that. We can be very kind when we are aware. If we know somebody has endured some kind of very traumatic experience, then we don't need to bring it up all the time, right? But we also can use that as an awareness to be kind to that person. So we also don't shut it off like, oh, I can't even think about that. That makes me terrible. But just have awareness, because we all have experiences in life that have been painful, and no one else can take responsibility for that. We can ask for assistance, we can ask for kindness and grace about it, you know, but we can't demand it. We can't expect others to know every nuance of that. So that's one thing I wanted to talk. There's a couple more things I want to say, but does that address like the sense of guilt or the sense of worry about it?
Yeah, on some levels it does.
Okay. And then another thing I want to say that might help, and then we'll come back and make sure if
Yeah.
there's anything left, that we didn't untangle. But another piece I'd like to untangle is this, and this is true for everyone. Spencer's brave to ask the question, but it's here to serve all of us. If you will drop into your heart, and if you're trying to manage it from the human brain, however beautiful and brilliant your brain is, you are limiting your ability, because you can't intellectually know all of this. And you're staying in your brain, and you're just going to be kind of in this little trap, Oh no, do I say this? Do I say that? Oh no, do I say this? Do I say that? Oh no, was my tone of voice? Oh, that was too harsh. It can drive you crazy. And then what happens is now you're not yourself. You're not you, right? You're there's this little thing up here that's like you're the puppet master of you. You're not you. The real you isn't allowed to speak and be. So what you want to do instead is you want to get into your heart and open to your divine self, and let your divine self lead the human self. And if you know for a fact that something was said that you truly know it didn't feel right, you didn't mean it to be insensitive, but then you could see that after it was spoken, it was, you can always reach out to the person. I mean, if you know them, reach out to them. And if you don't know them, you know what? You can do that energetically. You can energetically hold a sacred space of harmony, and I've done that with people. And in fact, before I ever reach out to someone, if I think that I need to have a conversation, I first do that. I hold sacred space, and I just choose harmony, and I just make sure that my heart is open, and the energy that I'm holding about that person is absolutely pure. It's harmony. It's pure love of the divine. It's harmony that is of the divine. That it's not a human manipulation. I need harmony because I don't want us to have any issues, or you know what I mean? There's no agenda to it. It's pure. Then if I feel led, I will reach out. And you and I've had conversations like that. Did I handle that in a way that felt bad to you? It's a sincere question without agenda. Then I'm not guarded when I listen to your answer. Because if your answer is, yeah, that didn't feel very good, or I didn't get offended, but I wasn't, I really didn't know what you meant by something, or, and then we can clear it up. And you can do that with others as well. Okay. Now, how does that feel?
Yeah, that feels good. Part of my situation that I described, um I guess it has to deal more with, some of the stuff that I've said or did, um wasn't like, it's one of those things where you say it and it's like, like, eh, um it's wrong, like, and you still do it.
That's
It's something that could, and that's part of, there was a time in my life where everything that was said that was entertaining or funny to the circle of people I was with had edge to it, had some sort of
Right.
level of edge, and it's we're going to make fun of the taboo subjects and we're going to make light of while I think there's a place for that, it's like one of those things that I kind of had is like a remnant of a past life that was like a artifact that it's like, and more often than not, you know, I look at the different situations that come up in my life where I relive that memory and feel really bad about it. A lot of those situations where that does come up, is alcohol is involved or some sort of, you know,
Mhm.
conscious altering substance is, you know, where it's
Yeah.
like your judgment and your awareness. So um you know,
Mhm.
and a lot of times it's not in front of people, it's just something, you know. One that comes to mind was at a big gathering, somebody was asking me who somebody was and I wasn't sure who they were talking about, so I described them as like a character from a TV show, and one that I thought was like you know, a good doppelganger, and like you know, I didn't think, and I thought, ooh, if that person had heard that, maybe they would have been hurt by that. And I'm like, maybe they did hear me because we're at, you know, like we're talking at a party and maybe they overheard it. So um
Yeah.
you know, it just kind of cycles a lot of then anxiety in me. um and yeah, so I guess that's kind of more description on that situation, and I don't know if we're getting further from the topic or not, but
No, I think that's great. That's exactly these are the things that cause triggers.
yeah.
These are when triggers happen. So I like that it's actually a self trigger, as you said.
Correct, yeah.
It's a self trigger. Um, and I think that's wonderful because if you catch the self trigger, then you won't knowingly trigger
Right.
others, right? And also by practicing the healing of the self trigger, you will be less you'll have less to be triggered by others. You know, other people won't be able to trigger you easily, right?
Right.
Okay, because the self-awareness brings you then into that grounded state where you're in mastery of your energy.
Right.
Okay, so what I want to say here is this. There's a phrase, we've all heard it, I think, and at least it's in our culture. Um, it's as long as it's funny, it doesn't matter who gets hurt. Used to be a common phrase. Well, that's a very unconscious way to live. In fact, it can be a very cruel way to live. And there's it, and I really think it's perfect that you brought this up because I know, you know, in family gatherings in the past in my life and friend gatherings, I think were even worse, to be honest. I know there's friends where they think the only way they know to connect with another person is not heart to heart. It is absolutely wicked humor, what we call wicked funny, right? Well, wicked funny can be very painful. It can be very painful for someone. And so, like for myself, I'm a person who is um, a very generally a kind of a quiet person. I mean, I can open up and have a good time, you know, but, you know, I generally come into a gathering and I'm just kind of in my own space, you know. I'm a very self reflective person and inner reflective person. And there are people who like to make fun of people like that, right? And then there are people who are real boisterous, and there are people who like to make fun of them for being boisterous, right? So we want to, I think what's important is you need to ask yourself before, is it, if you're intentionally making fun of somebody, that's mean, you know, whether it's a little bit or a lot, you know, it's still on the scale of deliberately degrading another person, not having sacred honor, right? And so I think it's brave of you to submit that there was a time in your life when maybe that wasn't a huge scale, but on a little scale, that was that was a pattern in a group of people that you were friends with. And I think if we were all honest with ourselves, we realize we've had that either in a family dynamic, in a business setting. You go along with the stronger personality in the group. You kind of go along with where they take you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And I think that's when we're in our very much human primal state rather than aligned and evolved consciousness state. And that's what we're wanting to learn to not do, because that's just like the survival of the fittest kind of thing. It's an emotional, psychological survival of the fittest rather than choosing to being committed to sacred honor, being committed to learn sacred energy, how to practice sacred energy dynamics, and then sticking to it, And you may not have to confront somebody necessarily. You might choose to, but you don't have to. But you have to have the conviction to not let that energy dynamic pull you in. And if they want, and I've had people like say, "Oh, you're no fun." Like, well, that's not, I don't, and I'm just saying, that's not my idea of fun.
Yeah.
And I learned to say in groups like that, I will not participate in any form of degrading another living being. I just won't. With whatever reason somebody wants to say it and do it and think it's funny and all that, I'm not going to try to wrestle them and make them shut up. I'm not going to engage in some physical thing where I'm trying to control them. I'm just going to say, you know what? I'm not going to participate in this. I learned to say it calmly. I don't choose to participate in anything that is what I feel is degrading toward another person, and just leave. And then I just leave, because I don't want to stay if that's what's going to happen. I may just leave the room and go talk to somebody else in the group, and if everybody's like that, and then I may choose to leave the gathering completely, right? And not go back. And I want to say this to everybody listening. I invite you to have the courage to do that, because when we have the courage to do that, we stop the cycle of intentionally bullying and intentionally energy vampiring one another. When we have the courage that we see it happening, and those people they may never evolve their consciousness to a point where they even understand it. But we don't have to stay present, and whatever you do, if you do stay present, do not allow your energy to engage with it. And do you know what I mean when I say that? Does that make sense? Don't invest your energy in it. Don't get into a debate with them. Don't get into an argument with them. Just say, I don't choose to do this. Period. You may not say it out loud. Just know it. I don't choose to do this. Leave the room, leave the conversation, leave the room, maybe leave the gathering if you feel that's appropriate. But don't participate in it. Don't give your energy to it. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. That makes a lot of sense.
So the other thing I want to say is that when you have these things, like you're calling it a self-trigger, I invite you to do two things. Number one, stop guilting yourself. Just effing stop. It's a gift of awareness. Perhaps you could have said it better. Perhaps it was completely received with the humor you intended it. Stop guilting yourself, first of all. And then you can't process it if you're in that state of guilt or shame or blame or whatever. You can't, because then you're beating up on yourself. Now you're in your head and the puppet master has you. It's not you.
Right.
So don't be mad. Don't be mad at yourself. I mean, don't be mean to yourself. Just stop. Just tell yourself, okay, stop. I don't choose to do this. I don't choose to guilt myself. If I messed up, I forgive myself right now. And then you can get centered. open to the divine, and let that divine self of you take over. And then just make inquiry, ask for divine guidance. Do I need to address this with this person? Do I need to call them or text them or sit down with them? Do I need to talk to them and see if I said something that was either misunderstood or, without realizing it, perhaps it was hurtful? And then you'll get a very clear yes, but you won't get the clear yes or no if you're in that guilt, because then now you're not in your heart. See, now you're not connected to the divine. The divine is not going to feel guilt, isn't blaming you, isn't shaming you. That's their ego doing that. That's that human ego thing. So just stop it. Just tell yourself, no, stop the guilt, stop. Take a breath, get down into your body, down into your heart, open to the divine. And you might have to wait till you have some time alone. You might, it's not like you have to do it immediately. You might need, it's not always best to respond to these things immediately, because you need to come into it with a different energy than you were in when it happened. Right? And then you'll know. And you know what? Even if it turns out it was nothing, sometimes it feels good just to make sure. But remember, it's a gift of awareness for you that you had this little thing, kind of this little knot that you want to untangle. And you may get the guidance. It's not something you need to address. It actually might make it worse, but you'll have the awareness of how to proceed differently in the future. And it might be it was nothing at all. But see, you might be picking up on the energy that happened. And was that energy yours, or was that energy the other person's?
I mean, it varies from situation to situation. I think, I think the energy was mine when in each instance that I feel the guilt about was my energy. I think it all stems from, like you said, kind of nail on the head, at a time when I was hanging out with a group of people, and the strongest personality was like the one that everybody kind of emulated. And
Yes.
that's just like an artifact of that time where that's how we were all kind of behaving. And it's funny because I can look back and realize that the person with that dominant personality is like the least secure of any of the people.
Yes. That's what
And
ends up happening.
they are just projecting whatever they can, and everybody else just kind of glommed onto it. And
They're
it kind of,
projecting their vulnerability,
yep,
their insecurity,
yep.
projecting it out because they don't know how to deal with it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And then everybody else kind of, so um yeah, so like I recognize that when I continued to do that and have that behavior, that was my energy and my choice. It stemmed from a place where it was, I picked this up from some other people that had their own stuff and weren't processing things and just projecting all over the place. um so
I
yeah.
would I would say that what's happened is you have evolved your consciousness to where now that feels very off,
Right.
where it very out of alignment, very untrue to who you really are. And you're aware of it now. As we evolve our consciousness, we become very aware when we're out of alignment. And it doesn't feel good. Where before we lived that way more often and made ourselves tolerate it. And as we evolve our consciousness, we stop tolerating that discomfort. That out of alignment feeling is very uncomfortable. And the in alignment feeling is wonderful. It feels wonderful. We want to be in that more because it feels good, right? And it brings good. It feels good. It is good. And it brings good. It brings the light. It is our light, and we are bringing our light when we're in alignment and we're living. Our divine self is leading our beautiful human self. And so I'm encouraging you not use your humor. You have a great sense of humor. And I understand, but humor can be used to hurt. And it's a bullying tactic that in our culture we think we have to tolerate, but we don't. And we can stop. We can't make somebody else not do it. I mean, we're not going to just, want to go around beating people up, right? We can't do that, but we can stop adding our energy to it. And that does help it stop being circulated. So great awareness.
Thank you.
So,
Yeah, I like
yeah.
that thought of it being, the gift of awareness rather than feeling guilty about it. It's like this isn't anything, it's yeah, just the ego is the one that's making me feel guilty about it.
Yeah.
And that just look at it like this is a gift of awareness that I had those experiences and that was a part of who I was at one point. Um, and also that it was not the essence of who I was. Like, that was just something that I was using to mask my own insecurities. And it doesn't serve me anymore. So it makes it, yeah, I'm gonna have a good time processing and releasing that
Isn't that
later.
cool? I'm telling
Yeah.
you, when we learn to process and release, and when we come back on December 4th, 2 weeks, we're going to go deep into processing and releasing. And it becomes the thing you love to do instead of the thing you avoid doing.
Mm-hmm.
Because if the reason we avoid it is we do the guilt and blame and shame on ourselves, the judgment and condemnation, and that feels so horrible that we don't want to go there. But see, if you start by just saying, stop that crap, stop it. I'm not doing that to myself. If you start with that, now you can process without all that. And it's like you step back and you observe instead of you're beating up on your own self.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay, cool. Anything else before we wrap up?
Nothing from me, and do not see anybody in the comments. So,
Okay. I do want to say yesterday was a wedding, and some of our members had celebrated a wonderful wedding. So I want to send some love and joy out to Lucy and her daughter Dee and granddaughter Annie, who was married this weekend, and just to their whole family. It's a big, wonderful family, and we want to send them lots of love. I know I'm sure it was a beautiful, wonderful gathering, and we're happy for them. So we must join you in celebrating this very, very special, happy event in your family. Okay, so we will not be live next Sunday. I will put a post. I always put a post up, and I will choose a replay for you that I recommend, and put up a question for you to be reflective about. And then the next Sunday after that is December 4th, and we will be back on that Sunday. Hold on one moment. And we will then complete our conversation on triggers. And the topic will be emotional triggers and processing to release negative patterns. The concept we will teach is processing old trauma wounds is empowering and liberating. We're actually going to go through that and process that together. And then the two questions that we will have for conversation and reflection is, what if the experience of feeling triggered is a divine gift for you? And the other question, when this is the big one right here, is what if you could learn to process your emotions in every situation without shame or blame, and embrace that process as the truth that sets you free to expand, evolve, and elevate in every aspect of life? That's what we are all about. So that's really like the the blossoming of this entire series. And then the 2 weeks after that, we're going to come in and have deeper conversation. We're going to really address it in specifics, like business conversations, and family conversations, and friend and personal conversations. So we're going to really come in and take deep questions. You can send them in advance. We'll start talking about that on the 4th. So we'll be back live on December 4th. Watch for a replay and some inquiry questions so you can continue to practice. And another thing I think is really wise to do on the Sundays we're not live is, I know for most of you, I hear from you that the meditative energy immersion, that period, is very helpful. So what I suggest is, if you don't want to watch the replay that I will put up for you, then go back to the beginning of this series, not the first one, and go to it's usually around the 30-minute mark, something like that, 30 to 40 minute. Go to that little maybe 5 to 10 minute session and go through them back to back. Go through them like a binge session, and I promise you it will be powerful for you if you will do that. So that's my encouragement. And to all of you about to engage in a family gathering, I'm holding sacred space that it will be lovely. And I want to say this to you: no matter what happens, it's a divine gift of awareness, if you will allow it to be. The joy is a divine gift of awareness, of that consciousness in you, that light in you is shining out and connecting with that light in others. And anything less than joy, that is also a divine gift of awareness, an opportunity to clean up something that's restricting the joy, the flow, the sacred dynamic of love and joy and harmony. And so I invite you to go to whatever gatherings you're having in the next 2 weeks, social, business, family, spiritual, with that intention, and it will serve you powerfully. And I look forward to hearing from you. As Spencer said, if I can help you with any of that, the website shows ways to reach to me. You can contact me by email. We can even set up a phone consultation or Zoom consultation. So just let me know and we can work that out. Okay. Have a wonderful, blessed few weeks, and we will see you on December 4th.